So I've got my fretboard laid out. I've drawn a straight line on my bench top, and I've got a spot where you've got 0 and then my scaling, which is 25 inches or 635 millimeters. So when you go to lay out a fretboard, the first thing you have to do is get a straight edge on one of these sides. So we're going to use a contractor square to put in our fret lines, and I've got a modified contractor square with some neodymium magnets in here, so that when I come to cut it, my fret saw sticks to this fence, and so I get a really clean edge. And I'll get some video of me cutting here in a minute. First thing we got to do is set up where we want our nut to occur, and I like to have a little overhang, so I build this in. So 0 is going to be from here for me. So now we need to get the string taper. What this is going to help us do is identify how wide our fretboard is going to be at the heel section and at the nut section. So here's our bridge. I've changed out the saddles for these more vintage looking saddles. And what we're going to do is set the saddles roughly where 25 inches is, or 635 millimeters. And we're going to identify that point right in the center. And then I'm going to run my center line on this line that I've drawn on my bench top, and line up this other line with my 0 line. So there we go. Now I built my own nuts, but I use a synthetic one just as I'm building, and then I build my nut according to this one. So I set that up, and I put 2 little marks where the low E and high E string are. So right now what we're about to do is measure out our string spacing using a laser level. Let me see if I can turn this off. So the way this works is I'm going to run a laser from the saddle on the farmost saddle to the nut where the strings touch. And so I'm going to see exactly what my string spacing is going to be. And I use the inside edge of this laser, and then with a very accurate mechanical pencil I mark out where that laser actually meets. And that gives us our string spacing for that string. Now we do the same thing on the other side. So I got the inside of that laser there, inside of it there, and we mark out where that is on our neck, on our fretboard. So now that I have these 2 lines, I can draw in my string spacing, and then we'll decide how many millimeters we're going to use on either side for the final dimension of the fretboard. So there's IE. And I think what I've done in the past is about 3 millimeters of overhang. And that gets me really close to, it gives me enough space so that I can back out more if I need to once I put the strings on. But it's also small enough, or large enough, or small enough that, if I don't need to, 3 millimeters is actually a pretty healthy margin on either side. So here, this is where our strings are gonna go. So now we need to come out on either end of these lines and mark out roughly what the distance is on your nut. So right here it's 3 millimeters. So what I'll do, this one's a little more accurate, is I'll come out 3 mil from the inside of that line. 1, 2, 3. Put a line. 3 mil from the inside. 1, 2, 3. And that's probably going to be about the width of our binding. And it is. So what we'll actually do in this case is we're going to cut out the fretboard along the string path, and then this binding will act as our overhang because it's pretty thick. And it'll look neat too. The strings are going to pass directly over where this binding channel is, and I like the way that that works out. So I'll probably just cut this out as it is now with this string spacing, rather than going through the process of cutting it out oversized and then removing material to get it to the right width for so that I can attach some binding. But I'm going to go ahead and draw these in anyway, just to be safe. And this will give us our final dimensions for the fretboard, the neck, where this thing is going to sit on the body. I pulled the clamps off the body this morning, and there aren't any gaps, and it held together fine last night. And so I'm going to let it sit for till tomorrow, and I'll get to cleaning up final sanding around the perimeter and really defining the shape of this a little bit better. The body turned out pretty good. This is the back. And the truss rod came in the mail, so I might actually get to cutting the truss rod today. So now that I've got my taper, I can start placing my frets. To do that, I use a tool that StuMac has on their website, and it's a fret position calculator. And so I do 24 frets. I do 635 millimeters, and I have to change this to millimeters, which is 25 inches. Calculate it. And so here are my frets. The reason I use millimeters is because you can get a really inexpensive yardstick that goes well beyond your scale length, and the error involved with millimeters is it's so easy to read, it's so easy to know exactly where all of your frets are. You don't have to move the tool. I used to use calipers and inches, and I would have to move the calipers every bit, and so your error becomes compounded. And this way it's really clean, it's really easy, and you can do any scale length. I had somebody come that needed a fretboard, and the scale length was real bizarre, and so I was able to build them a fretboard according to that weird scale length because I just converted everything to millimeters, and it was like 200, I don't know, something weird. So I use a 25-inch scale length, and we'll get into that once I start plotting some of these frets down. But it's as simple as using your straight edge, measuring out on the center. So for instance, the first fret is going to sit at 35.6 millimeters. So let's go from the nut. We're going to go down 35.6. So in between 35 and 36, which is right there. The next one is 69.27. So 65, 6, 7, 8, 9, right there. So you just do this along the whole thing. Once I get my dots in place, I'll come back with a square, make sure that it's, you know, flush with the square edge that I created, and we'll just mark that out. And so there's our first fret. And it's square to this edge is square to my center line, and so regardless of what kind of piece of wood you have, you can really decide how you want the grains to fit, and as long as you follow this formula, it's easy to cut straight, parallel, and perpendicular lines and get a really clean, really easy fretboard. And I'll get into fret cutting here in a second, but I got to mark these out. All right, now that I've got all of my frets laid out, as you can see here, so we've got all of our frets. We've got our taper. It's time to start cutting these. So what I like to do is take my square. I'll start with one of these. Take my handy dandy fret saw. I don't remember what kerf this is, but I got it on Amazon. I've put some painter's tape so I know how deep to go. Right now I haven't radiused this yet, so I'm just going in to create a first cut. And then once I've put a radius on this, I'll probably come back at a later time and put some more depth into it before we put on the binding. So like I said, my, get some of these dogs. My fret saw is magnetically held to that fence, and then I just bring it right over that fret that I've got drawn out and slowly etch in a fret. So for now, I'll go down to that blue tape. So as long as you've got this one straight edge, and your straight edge is fit with one of these types of saws, you get a really straight, precise cut that is perfect for adding frets. And so once I get all of these cut out, I think I'm only going to go to 21 frets, so somewhere around here. But so I'm going to hold off on cutting these. But I'm going to go ahead and cut one through wherever I'm going to end, and then I'll usually cut the nut last. I'll decide what kind of nut I'm going to use, etc. So let me get to cutting these, and we might get to planing the neck flat. I haven't decided yet. It's been a long day. So we've got all the fret slots cut, and I cut the nut slot out. I don't know if you can see that. This wood is plenty hard enough to be a fretboard. I was skeptical at first, but it took a lot to cut these out, so it's plenty hard now. So now all I need to do is cut on the outside edge of the string paths, and then we'll glue up this face to that, and that is exactly 3 millimeters. I didn't even mean to do that on purpose, but it's going to be really nice. I went ahead and cut to 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, so 20. We're not going to put in a 21st fret instead what I'm going to do is come out with a little bit of a lip right here. So we're not going to have a 21st fret. That way this neck pickup can really get some fat low end. The neck pickup will probably sit about right here where the 23rd and 24th frets start. I don't know. We might put a 21st in there. I don't know. But I'm thinking 20 is plenty. A Strat has 21, but the single coil is down here. So I'm anxious to see what a P90 sounds like because it's already got that growl. Moving it up will make it fatter and a little growlier, which is what we're going for. So I still need to plane this. I didn't get to as much as I'd like to today, but tomorrow we will get a lot more done. So at least the fret slots are cut. Now I need to cut the tapers, glue on the binding around each of the edges, and then we'll put a radius on it. Well, no, then after we bind it, we're going to glue it to the neck. We've got our truss rod that came in the mail. Truss rod will fit about like that. Fretboard, it's going to go about like that. So the body will hit about here. Yeah, that's perfect. And so you'll have a lot of room to play. Yeah, so the fretboard will end about there. And then the P90 will sit right in here. It's going to look awesome. But we got to put this on this first so I can run this over my table router and get a really clean edge to mirror the taper of this. And then we'll radius it. We need a flat surface to run on that table router because I've put a radius on this before and you get squirrely on that thing and it ruin your life in seconds. So we'll see what I get to tomorrow.